Today I'm going to take you on a demonstration to prove that Barack Obama's long-form birth certificate, as released on the whitehouse.gov website in April of 2011, is a complete and abject forgery. The first thing I'm going to do is take you to the White House website, and we're going to download a copy of that PDF file containing the long-form birth certificate. So first we'll go to www.whitehouse.gov. We see the usurper himself right on the front page, as we would expect the king to build a statue to himself and erect it for all of us to praise. Down here we go to the search box that says, what are you looking for? Obama long form birth certificate. That's going to take us to the White House blog. You can see that it's already highlighted in purple because I've already visited this site, but let's click on it here. When we click on it, it takes us to the blog entry dated April 27th of 2011. And the blog post title is aptly titled President Obama's Long-Form Birth Certificate. It's written by Dan Pfeiffer. You scroll down here and you can see an iframe that contains the long-form birth certificate inside of a little window embedded inside the page. But when you scroll up right here, you're going to see that you can click on the link to bring you directly to that PDF file. So when we do that, it opens up the PDF itself, and you can see here in the address bar, the PDF is opened up in Adobe Acrobat's control built into, in my case, Google Chrome, the web browser. So when we scroll down here, we can save this PDF file. I'll save it to my desktop so we can find it easily. So now we have the actual file that was produced by the people at the White House and delivered to the American public through the White House's website. Now, if we open this thing up in Adobe Acrobat, we would see exactly what we just saw on the website, only we'd see it in a local program installed on my computer here. We wouldn't have a way to really do much in the way of analytics on this particular file. So we're going to open this up in another one of Adobe's programs known as Adobe Illustrator. So when we right-click on the file and select Open With, we can see Adobe Illustrator CS6 is in our list. Now you'd need to have this program installed on your computer, which I happen to have it installed. So we'll click on that. It's going to take a second for it to open up as it is a large program. But I do want to explain a little bit about what we're about to embark upon while this program is opening up. If you were to take a physical piece of paper and either make a photocopy of it or scan it, you'd be essentially scanning the single sheet of paper into one layer, as we call it in graphics. A layer represents all of the information that is contained on a sheet of paper, so to speak. But if you were to take a photo of someone and scan that photo in, and the photo, maybe had some defects or was discolored slightly, you probably heard the term, oh, that model on the cover of that magazine, that picture was photoshopped. That's not how they look. Well, the process of quote-unquote photoshopping somebody is the process of adding an additional layer. And adding a layer provides the ability to overlay something like, say, airbrushing or other attributes to the file. So here we have Adobe Illustrator open, and we have Barack Obama's long-form birth certificate. And over here on the toolbar, we have this layer toolbar, which gives us access to all of the layers. Now, if this birth certificate was actually scanned the way the White House said it was scanned, it should only exist in one layer. Does that make sense? I mean, you can move the thing around. It's just one layer. It's one object. It's like if you were holding one physical piece of paper, you could move it to all four corners of your desk. Similarly, with a computer, if this was one layer, we should be able to move the whole thing throughout the confines of our screen. But let's go over to the layer palette here, and we expand layer 1. Oh, it looks like we have a sub-layer here. What's that all about? And it looks like if we expand this caret here, oh my goodness, what do we have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 sub-layers inside of this clip group. Now these icons here that look like eyes, they represent the visibility of a particular layer, whether or not a layer is visible during the process of viewing it. I just zoomed in on the birth certificate a little bit so that we could make more sense of what it is we're looking at. If I were to turn off this master layer, or the super layer, so to speak, everything would disappear, which makes sense. If we were to just grab the entire piece of paper and take it off the desk, it would no longer be on the desk. So when we turn it back on, it reappears. What happens if we turn off the clip group? Well, similarly, there are no attributes that are picked out when we shut off this clip group, so we would expect everything to disappear. Turn it back on. Let's go down into some of the layers that are contained inside of this clip group. When we turn this off, oh, it looks like something on the edge just turned on and off. You can see right here along the edge on the right-hand side and on the left-hand side, it looks like there is a bit more of this. We're going to refer to it as the herringbone background. It's not really a herringbone, but I can't really think of a descriptor that would identify this pattern better than herringbone. Secondly, we'll go down to this next layer. I turn that on and off. I don't really see much going on and off here. There's some stuff down here. Does that go on and off? No, nothing really goes on and off on there. I may just be overlooking something. Let's go down to the third layer. Let's turn that off. Not really seeing a whole lot there either. We'll turn it back on. We get down to the fourth layer. Ooh, something just disappeared. Did you catch that? Turn it on, turn it off. Turn it on, turn it off. Well, in case you missed it, I am going to zoom in right here to the word none. While I'm zooming in, let's just take note of the color of the letters N, O, and N. They're much lighter than the E here in none, and they're also much lighter than the letters up here in the word outside and whatever these other letters are. But when we click on this here, N, O, and N disappears. Now, while we have N, O, and N turned off, let's take a look at what's behind it. Why is the herringbone background gone from behind the N, O, and the N? If you were to put this blank birth certificate piece of paper inside of the typewriter back in 1961 or whenever it was that Barack Obama was born, presumably the entire background would be comprised of this herringbone pattern. But here we see it has been erased or turned white. And I find that particularly interesting because when we zoom back out here, it's absolutely clear that right here the herringbone background has been erased and turned into white background. Now, I have no idea what incentive or what motivation there would be for the forger, so to speak, or the person manipulating and altering this document, what their motivation would be to alter the N, O, and the N. You never know. I mean, what's the question here? It says type of occupation outside home during pregnancy. Who knows? I mean, it says N-O-N-E for none. It could say home. It could say a variety of other things. But I guess we'll never know. Let's move on to the next layer down. We'll zoom out a little bit just so we have a better idea of what it is we're looking at. Let's turn off this next layer. Ooh, I don't know if you caught that. Lower left-hand corner, take a look, turning on and off, on and off. Let's zoom in on that and see what it is that we find. Date accepted by local reg. I'm assuming that means local registrar's office. Aug-8, 1961. Again, the AUG, the hyphen, the 8, the 1, 9, and the 6 are all a much lighter color than the 1. And when you turn off this layer, what you have is a whitened background that has seemingly erased the herringbone base layer of the original birth certificate. Again, why is it that this document forger or alterer, as we'll call them for now, was motivated to manipulate and modify the date on the date accepted by local reg on item number 20 here on the birth certificate? I don't know. But I can tell you this much. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time creating a good forgery. It's not very difficult for anybody who knows even the slightest thing about image editing. I could say SEP 20199, and then I could grab this. And of course, my font isn't correct. But just imagine if I took 2 seconds like this, and I modified this, and then I zoomed out like this. You'd have a hard time really distinguishing. I mean, of course, you might see it if you were looking for it. But again, I didn't take the time to painstakingly go through every single serif and every single other attribute of the fonts that were used on this birth certificate. So let me just take this off here, and I'm going to turn back on this date. But as you can clearly see, this date could be anything. It could be anything that the forger or the document alterer chose for it to be. Let's zoom back out again. Oops. Alright, there we go. Had a little hiccup there with the computer, but fairly typical with computers. Go to the next layer down. What happens if we turn this layer off? Ooh, did you catch that one? It's another date alteration in the lower right-hand corner. Let's take a look. We'll zoom in on Aug 8, 1961. Now I wonder, does that August 8th, 1961 look like the other August 8th, 1961? Is it possible that that is the exact same copy of Aug 8, 1961? Well, geez, I'm not really sure. If I were to grab this, it would take a little bit more to actually grab and compare this, but I'm just going to ask the question for rhetorical sake. Again, my apology here. Computer's kind of slowing down during this recording process here. Take a look at this Aug 8, 1961 and this Aug 8, 1961. Are they the same one that have maybe been rotated slightly? You rotate it using the rotation tool. Again, it begs the question, what motivation would the document alterer have to manipulate the date here and the date on line 20? And once again, we see behind these omitted or deleted modified numbers and letters, we see a white background which has erased the herringbone pattern. Zooming back out, we'll do the same thing on the next layer down, and let's see what this layer is. Oh, this layer is yet another date. You can see April 25th, 2011. What possible motivation is there for this document editor forger to create a separate layer with a separate date? It just doesn't make any sense. So we'll turn that off. Zoom out a little so you can see the whole doggone thing, because there's some interesting stuff down here. We have the certification here. The state registrar here, Alvin T. Onaya, PhD. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. What happens when we turn off this next layer down? Well, Alvin's entire certification disappears. And I wonder what we're going to see behind that certification. We're going to see white erasure of the otherwise original green herringbone pattern, which was on the blank form of the original birth certificate from 1961, I think it was. I'm having a hard time keeping my dates straight because all the dates have been altered and manipulated on this document. We'll go down to this second to last layer and turn it off. And lo and behold, the whole stinking thing has been manipulated and edited. Look at this. If this is not an absolute mockery of justice, if this is not an absolute snub of the nose in the American people's face, I don't know what else is. The entire document, with the exception of a couple of signatures, has been edited and manipulated, and the herringbone background has been erased out and turned white for effect. And probably so that they could slyly insert the data into this document that they found appropriate for their purposes. Lastly, we'll turn this layer off, and that layer here is the background itself. It's the actual green background. Now, this presents a series of questions which flow from just some basic principles of photocopying, some basic principles of creating reproductions of documents. And, I have a lot of experience in this. I've been in the computer industry for 20 years. I've been an expert level user for over 30 years of computers, and this just screams certain levels of fraudulation right off of the page. First of all, we've all made photocopies of pages out of a book, and we put we've opened the book up to the page that we want, and we put the book on the photocopier. We put the cover down, and we hit the start or the copy button, and of course, along the binding, you'll see there's an obvious arcing where the book opens up. That makes sense. And what we would expect to see, I'm going to turn all these layers back on. Now that we've already proven that this is a forgery, I want to just talk a little bit about some of the additional fraud that we're detecting just by looking at this thing here. If this certificate of live birth was actually sitting inside of a book, a bound book, which it very well may be, then I would expect to see this arcing here along the binding. And that makes sense. But why does the pattern abruptly change along the left-hand edge here? It abruptly changes, however, the herringbone pattern is seemingly consistent. 2 horizontal, 2 vertical, 2 horizontal, 2 vertical. 2 horizontal, 2 vertical, 2 horizontal, 2 vertical. The pattern is seamless here. 2 horizontal, 2 vertical, 2 horizontal, 2 vertical. And there is seemingly no transitional effect on any of the edges. However, it has been made to look as though there is an arcing along the left-hand binding, or the left-hand edge, which would represent the binding in the center of the book. So it begs many, many questions about the authenticity and the veracity of this document here. I mean, I'll be honest with you, anyone with even a year's practice time in a document editing program such as Illustrator or Adobe Photoshop could very easily produce this document from scratch, much like a talented artist could put a picture next to his easel and reproduce the image in the picture by the stroke of his pen or his paintbrush. This could very easily be done here. This, at the very least, is a forgery and a fraud. Now, let me be clear about what I mean by forgery and a fraud. When you represent that a document is the true and accurate attest copy of an original, and there has been an alteration that has been made that has not been disclosed, that represents fraud. To manipulate a document for any purpose and then to represent it as being a true attest copy of the original is forgery. Now, I'm not saying that when we turn off this layer here, which layer was it? It's the next one down. This layer here or this layer here, which represent these dates. I'm not saying that they changed the date. Maybe it really was August 8th, 1961. I have no idea what the date really is. But the fact that they lifted the date off of the original document, they created a separate layer, and then they represented that this document is a true attest copy, that's a lie. That is a lie right to the face of the American people. So, at the very best case scenario, we have a document here whose four corners are accurate. The data is accurate, but it's a forgery, which is a felony, which is an impeachable offense. And in the very worst case scenario, this entire document is a fraud, and that not one single modicum of information on here is truthful. It's somewhere between felony and felony. And I'm not sure exactly to what degree. But either way, it's going to take, or I'm not sure what it's going to take to wake the American people up to see the reality that this guy, Barack Obama, is not who he represented himself to be. And there's so much more to it than just this simple birth certificate analysis. There are analyses that we could do upon the typeset to determine whether or not the typeset that was used in recreating this AUG-8196 is in line with the rest of the typeset that was used. It's basically a hermeneutical technique that's used to interpret the veracity of and the integrity of this document here. But for the purposes of this video, I think I've made my point. And unfortunately, the American people are so enamored by this guy. They're so enamored with his rhetoric and his speech giving and his ability to make people feel good and his ability to think on behalf of non-thinking Americans who just don't care about their own destiny, that they're willing to overlook these things. But there still is a large contingent of people out there who are unwilling to overlook these things and demand answers. Now, what that amounts to, I'm not really sure. But I've done my part. I have shown that beyond any reasonable doubt that this document is a forgery. Any questions, please post them in the comments. If you found this useful, please like the video. You can subscribe. Or if you hate the video, give it a thumbs down. Read me the Riot Act. I don't really care. I'd really like to hear what your opinions are on this. Thanks a lot.